I'm your host, Thomas Watson, and for today, we're talking a little bit about fighting fraud, carrier identity, and some recent funding with the folks at Highway. And if those of you haven't been keeping tabs with the market, freight fraud is a huge issue, especially when it comes to validating carriers. Whether you're large or small, doesn't matter the size, we need to make sure that you are real. Especially coming out of the pandemic, everyone figured out there was a gravy train of fraudsters. And so the folks at Highway are working to stem that tide, and they have some news. And so we're super excited to be talking with Michael Caney. He's the Chief Commercial Officer at Highway. He's going to be joining us to talk about their recent funding, their fraud fighting, and they had released their Trusted Freight Exchange, which is going to be really fascinating. Super excited to talk shop with them. And so without further ado, let's bring in Michael. Michael, welcome to the show, sir.
Hey man, it's good to see you again. I feel like we just did this. I think actually technically we did, but it's good to do it at least in this venue.
Oh yeah, it's good to have like 26 minutes nonstop. When you kind of have like 15 or 20, once you start getting cooking, it's kind of like cut short.
Yeah, it's almost like that's why you need like the kind of green room warm up, so that like you've at least got some your rhythm moving a little bit for what you're going to talk about. So but it's always good to be on a FreightWaves outlet, especially on one that caters to carriers a little bit. Because at the end of the day, right, the guy or gal in the truck, if they're not doing this, like we don't really have anything to talk about, we don't have anything to write about. Like it all kind of stops with somebody needing to get in the truck and deliver something, and so that's really the most important.
Exactly. And for those folks as well, one of the big things is making sure that they are not competing against fraudsters. And so you guys have an excellent fraud platform. Let's dive into some of the background. Talk to us a little about Highway, some of your experience, and then we'll get into some of this recent news that you've all had.
Yeah. So, the background to Highway is interesting. It's funny, Thomas, I talk about it so much, I just assume everybody knows, but I still get a lot of questions of like, where'd Highway come from? Why was it started? And the reality is that, what carriers will know about definitely is Triumph, because either they've been factored by Triumph or they've gotten paid by Triumph from through their factoring department or Triumph Pay. And our CEO, Jordan Graft, actually ran the Triumph Pay business within Triumph. He was the CEO of that business. And so, Triumph's got community banks, and they've got a factoring business, and they've got supply chain financing, and they've got a payments business. And what he saw when he was at Triumph was, I and others calling him and saying, "Hey, Jordan, I need to like not pay this freight bill," right? So when you assign your payments to Triumph Pay, like if they get a valid POD, like they're gonna pay this bill on your behalf, right? And you can't just not pay somebody, right? It's not, you can't just decide to not pay somebody, and they have a duty to make a payment, right? They've got a valid bill rating, and they get the load from the TMS, like they got a duty to make a payment. And so, brokers are telling Jordan, like, "Hey, I don't know if this person actually ran the load. I don't know if this is the right person." He's like, "What do you mean you don't know who hauled the load?" And so as he dug into it, and it's expensive in banking to reverse a payment, right? Like it's not a good thing. It's expensive. It's not a good look. And so you don't want to have payment reversals just as a practice in banking and payment businesses. And so when he got to looking into it, what he really figured out is that it's an identity problem, right? And so, and at the core of fraud and everything that was going on, the issue was a lack of identity. And so what people were doing in the industry is they were signing up carriers, and they were thinking of it like vendor onboarding, like vendor clearance, right? And when you do vendor clearance or vendor onboarding, you're making an assumption that the person on the other end of that onboarding is real. And so the whole notion of how brokers worked with carriers was a massive assumption of trust. You send a packet, and if it's a DOT number and you get an insurance certificate, like you're making a massive assumption that vendor on the end of what's really a vendor clearance form is true. And so what happened is a freight broker, you let everybody in the house, and then you'd look around your house and you try to figure out if there were any bad guys in your house. That's a little weird. It's a little backwards. And what you do in banking, or what you do in finance or anything else, is you do KYC. You do know your customer. If you're a carrier listening, like you go through this when you go through your trailer leasing, you apply for a loan, you buy a truck, like that lender is going to do KYC, know your customer. You're going to make sure that you are who you say you are, and that you're capable of doing the thing that you want to do. In this case, make good on the financing. And so what Jordan says is that we can solve this problem because we can apply the same principles that exist in other areas of commerce, KYC, know your customer, know your business, to trucking, and we can just establish this category of carrier identity, which no one's really doing. And so our thesis was like, hey, if you do that, what we've seen in other areas is that when you know who you're working with, you can actually go really fast. And we experience this like when we sign in with Amazon to buy things on Amazon. We go through facial recognition or two-factor. When we sign in to use our Google accounts, like this is not new, right, Thomas? Like we do this in life. And it's very low friction. Like literally in like 3 seconds before I got on the phone with you, I ordered a monitor arm. And it was like, oh, I need to do that real quick. And I think it took me 2 minutes. Stupid example, but like I was exposed, right? Like I was on a site using my credit card with a credit limit. Like if that wasn't secure, I could be really exposed. But it was easy because my identity was there and it was stored, and Amazon knows who I am, and they're looking at my device and looking at my login history. So that's the example. And so we just applied that to this context in a B2B environment. The challenge when you're doing motor carrier identity is you have this mixture of human elements, like just users, like who the user is, and physical equipment and the actual capability of the physical equipment, right? And so the rub is you got to figure out, is this a good or bad actor? And when they're representing something to the motoring public or to a freight broker, it all comes down to the equipment. Where is it? What is it? Is it insured? Does it pass business rules? And that was the challenge. That was the challenge in the beginning, is like, how do you blend this digital world of just user authentication and authorization with actual physical capability? And that was kind of the foundation of Highway and how we got into looking at scheduled autos and ELDs and all those things.
You kind of got a twofer. It reminds me of, for a lot of truckers and a lot of carriers, the thinking is, why now? Why am I having to jump through all these hoops? And it reminds me of the early days before, the early e-commerce days. I think like Craig Fuller had an instance where, remember where you were afraid to use your debit card on websites because people were afraid you were going to get scammed or fraudsters. And then we had the payment validation, we had the rail set up, we had the trust. But in trucking, it's crazy because theoretically before COVID, this is my spicy take, it's safer to buy a package than it would be for a shipment, because we all just shook our hands and said, here you go, Thomas, here's your form, here's your insurance, you got your PDF, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, here's $100,000 worth of freight. And so it's kind of like we're going through that fintech revolution on the freight side, and now carriers are having to understand that it's no longer something where, just trust me, bro, you have to provide and show because it's been infiltrated by fraudsters.
No, you're 100% correct. And when I went back and was looking at category research and trying to understand like how we just tell our story in a way that makes sense, one of the things I looked at was the financial crisis. Actually, Craig and I talked about this when we did the Freight Fraud Symposium in Dallas. You look at Stripe and what's the other one? Plaid. You look at Stripe and Plaid, and what you have are like these secure rails. So my family and I just moved, and I had to get a loan. And anybody that's been through that knows like it's a pretty, it's an extensive process to get any kind of financing. And I remember when I got the first loan I ever did, it was much more manual, and I was having to do a lot of representations. It was still electronic, but it was much more manual. This time around, man, like I just connected my financial accounts. It took like a couple of minutes. And so literally the lender is looking at my financial activity and just instantaneous validating that everything I've represented is true. So what they're able to do in real time is ask me questions about my income and my financial status. And I'm representing something to them, right? And then I didn't know this, but then it's like, okay, now connect all your accounts. So I go in, I connect to my accounts, and it's already valid. And so now, and so they're using the same kind of trapdoor process that we use, right? To see like, hey, is what is happening representative of, is what's actually happening, does it match what this human is representing? And it's the fastest I've ever gone through a loan process. And yeah, so it's just like the financial crisis, right? Where you had lots of misrepresentations, you had money problems, but what did that give way to? It gave way to all these rails. It gave way to Stripe. It gave way to Plaid. It gave way to these exchange type environments where you're like, okay, we're just going to allow the parties to show up and talk to each other, right? Which is like what Visa did years ago for credit cards, right? You had all these individual banks doing things, and Visa created a network. So yeah, you do get the twofer. You get to take care of this problem, but it's a natural evolution. That's the thing. People don't understand highway. It's like, yeah, but you've actually already been through this. You may not have gone through this way in B2B, but as a consumer, like you've already gone through this, where we had a certain type of environment. It was exploited by criminals. We innovated to fix it, and now it's actually lower friction than it used to be. So not only is there less fraud, but the experience is actually improved. And that's exactly what we're trying to do for the carrier.
And I think one of the big things that I like about it is for the carrier, you got to understand that if you're doing your job right, this makes your life easier. For those who are being fraudsters about it, it finally catches them. And one of the things you recently announced back near the end of August was the launching of the Trusted Freight Exchange in order to counter fraud and improve transparency. I think this is really cool. I'm going to preface this real quick because I think a lot of people don't understand that in the game of load boards, I came from US Express, multi-billion-dollar asset-based company. We had regular load boards like DAT and Truck Stop. We had private third-party or 4PLs like Transplace. We had the internal customers like Home Depot having their own load board or Amazon. And then we had emails like a FedEx or an Amazon asking for stuff. There's so many different ways. And like, it's crazy to think that before there was a trusted platform, I literally could just email them my SCAC and be like, hell yeah, 4,500 USXI, let's go. And they're like, yeah, dude, but I could have had my email hacked. And then nowadays, like that stuff doesn't go anymore. So talk about this Trusted Freight Exchange, because I think that folks are not understanding that how important it is to have a safe space in terms of I trust you, you trust me. Now we can cut the small talk. Let's get to work.
Yeah, let's talk about that because trust goes both ways, right? So I reference this all the time. The Covey organization that does like 40X, like 4 disciplines of execution. They have a program called Speed of Trust. And so I borrow a lot of their language and I want to give credit to them. But they talk about businesses move at the speed of trust. And that when trust is high, you get trust dividends, you get to go really fast. When trust is low, you're going to pay trust taxes, right? And so when we talk about moving at the speed of trust is a two-way street. I have them on my desk somewhere. I keep these, right? About like how to establish, if I had them, I'd show them to you on camera, how to establish smart trust and how to build trust. And what happens is they have this whole exercise where if trust is fractured by one party, there's a way that you go about rebuilding and extending smart trust, right? So trust really is a thing that has to be built and thought about. Okay, why do I preface that? Because when we talk about the Trusted Freight Exchange, the whole idea of highway and the single sign-on was to say, can the broker trust this carrier? And if this carrier is trustworthy, the broker will be able to go faster. The carrier will be protected because we have to, by virtue of the business, we have to protect the carrier's identity in order for the broker to trust the carrier. You have to also protect the carrier so they get that benefit. Now in the exchange, the question we also have to answer is, can the carrier trust the broker?
Yeah.
Because you think about the example you just said, right? I could just say my SCAT code, but what else could a broker do on various load boards? They can game it. They can post the same load 3 times from 4 cities, right? They can say things about the weight, right? And so in order to create an exchange, you have to create a conforming transaction, which means like when the broker's signing up for the exchange, we're saying, hey, like there's rules here. And the rules are very different than what you can do on Craigslist. Because on Craigslist, you can just do whatever you want to do, right? But here, the transaction has to conform because we're going to represent to the carrier that this is a real load that you're going to get paid for. We're going to represent to insurers that these loads are safer. And to do that, Mr. Broker, you have to behave differently than you do on a public load board. You've got to be creditworthy. It's got to come from your system. You can't ghost post. You can't do a bunch of can get freight. The carrier has to know that the load is real and it's real now and it's represented appropriately. And Mr. Broker, you can do those things because, hey, this carrier is trustworthy. We've validated their ID. They've been through facial recognition. We see their location. We know what their insurance policy is. And now you're both playing by a certain set of rules and you're okay. And this is a safe place. But in order for that trust to exist, both parties have to play by a certain set of rules. So you can't just tell the carrier, you got to do all these rules, but the broker gets to do whatever the hell they want to do. Can't do that because that's not trust, Thomas. Like you both got to show up. And so that's kind of what we're trying to bring back. And it's different. So here's what I want to say. Like everybody calls it a load board. Highways get into the load board wars. That's fine. Makes for good journalism. The exchange is not a load board. This is not. Load boards are marketplaces that extract rents with transactional revenue. Marketplaces create rails where parties show up and do business together. And the exchange is in the background, right? Like a marketplace inserts itself into the transaction and says, I am now the point. I am the arbiter of the transaction. You need me. The exchange just says, no. I'm going to make it safe for you to find each other and do business really quickly. They're fundamentally different business models.
And I think there's a great angle to that. It reminds me of, first, it's like game theory. So the problem in freight right now is if you both cooperate, things are good. But if you and I are playing, if we're both given a load and I give you a fake load, I've just defected. And you're going to think, Thomas, you got to like double prove that I can trust you again because you just burned me once. And as a carrier, like that's rough. I've had it when I booked as a carrier many times where they fudge the numbers, fudge it. Oh, it's not a real load. Oh, it's given to someone else. And like you said, it's got to be on both sides. But one of the things I'm curious about is marketplace versus that kind of rent seeking. You pay for the load board, they extract a monthly payment, they pay for the seat. The exchange is guaranteed. Is that something where I guess it's guaranteed? Does Triumph, or how does that work as well to guarantee the transaction? Because I'm assuming that's the key thing is that there's that trust involved because there's a third party who's a guarantor instead of I'm just going to make you pay for this for the right to look at it.
I'll say this for the public. Like the guarantee is an evolution, right? How does that look today versus how does that look in the future? And the goal is for, yes, a third party like Triumph to be able to underwrite and guarantee the transaction, or at least to be able to give advances. For Triumph customers, it's really easy. So if you're a Triumph Payments customer, if you're a Triumph factoring carrier and you have a load pay account in a digital wallet, it's really easy, right? Like, we're going to look at that geofence, that carrier is real. You're going to get money in your digital wallet same day. Or you're going to be able to take an advance and not have to pay the same fees that you pay your factoring for advance. You get a lot of liquidity. Because here's the thing, let's talk about advances for a second. And this is not Highway's game, this is Triumph's game, but it's worth discussing. A lot of brokers quit giving advances, but carriers didn't stop taking advances. They just take them from them.
And they get their
So what happens is like you've allowed all of this third party you've got all these third parties to come in and really add incremental cost to the transaction in the form of like factoring companies. And there's a lot of fly-by-night factoring companies, 4 or 5 big ones and then, thousands of small ones. And so when you are a trusted carrier and a Triumph broker, you actually get to have visibility around that advance. It gets to be automatic. So it's now baked into the life cycle of the load through the platform. Right. So when you're a common customer of both parties, the financial liquidity and speed is now baked in because we can see what's going on, and Triumph can validate what's actually going on with the carrier. If the carrier has a digital wallet, has a load pay wallet, like if it's an RXO or a CH Robinson load that's on this factoring as a service product, right? That carrier is going to get paid really, really quickly. And so now what that it does is allows brokers to participate in the financial product sector, right? Like. Because Triumph's underwriting all of it, right? So you saw the announcement, like Robinson's doing business, RXO's doing business with Triumph. It's essentially like a white label factor solution where, RXO and Robinson get to support carriers in a very meaningful way, other than just giving them freight. Does that kind of make sense? So you're kind of bringing it all together, but you have to bring it together in an ecosystem, and you have to use category leaders to do it. You can't cobble together a bunch of solutions for people that don't know what they're doing. That's why like we're not a payments provider. We're an identity provider, right? Like we don't need to go get in the payments business or buy a payments company, right? There's somebody that does that and does it really well. So you let them do that, right? And you let there be a best-in-class experience. So that's the other thing that an exchange does, right? An exchange creates the environment where you can bring best-in-class parties, right? You're not just trying to build a moat around your offering. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think that one of the things is the speed of pay is super important because I've noticed that a lot of carriers have to use factoring companies because they're fearful that the broker may not have the right credit worthiness, the right financials. If the broker is delayed in extracting from the shipper, that can be 30, 45 days where you may be waiting to get paid and the broker tells you, well, Thomas, I can't help you. I'm waiting to get paid from like Lowe's or Mohawk or somebody. Yeah. So having the trusted exchange allows the underwriting, and it means that we can still get paid. We're all validated, but it really fixes that problem with the liquidity, which right now for carriers in this market, you got to get paid fast. I can't afford to keep asking you 45, 60, 90, 120 days to collect, or I could be like out of business by the time I get my money.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I love Adam Wingfield's voice for in this industry is, and if you're a carrier listening to this, you got to be listening to Adam Wingfield, because he's so good at helping carriers understand like their responsibility as business owners to treat themselves like a business, right, and to think about the financial metrics of their business. But what a carrier can't control are rates. They can't. They can't control what the shipper pays. And so what we've got to do as an industry, and where we're trying to play a part, is to reduce all of the friction that creates additional incremental costs, both for the broker and the carrier. And so when you do that, like you end up with liquidity. And so one of the ways you have to do that is you have to shrink the world. So let's talk about like what you're just like small carriers and needing to get paid. Marketplace models and load boards in particular, they need chaos in the long tail. Like you worked at a freight broker, you talk to freight brokers all the time. No freight broker writes a strategic plan that says, my strategic plan to improve coverage and EBITDA is to put more freight on a load board. It's never been in any strategic plan. It never will be. I did this for 20 years. None of us ever said, you know what we need? We need a better load board. You know what we need? We need more places to have to log in and look at freight. No carrier said, I want to log in 7 places and play games. You talked about the trust game, right? Everybody talks about relationships, but there's got to be a foundation of that relationship. When you get married, you sign up for a covenant before God, and you say, we agree on these principles. And if one of us breaks the covenant, we've got to reestablish that. And so this like carrier relationship thing, it's very squishy, and it varies from broker to broker. And Thomas, it may vary from person to person inside the same brokerage. And marketplaces and load boards need to say, well, we'll be the point. We'll take over the transaction. We'll pay. We'll do all the stuff. Or you can post in the wild, wild west. They create this false dilemma of two opposite ends of the spectrum. You see what I'm saying? One is like, I'm going to control. I'll just be the marketplace. The other is like, you can post it over here and you can hope. And you can do all your vetting. In order to create a trusted environment, you got to shrink the world. There's too many bad actors out there. So you've got to say, hey, like this group of carriers that operate by these rules, they're all okay. This group of brokers that operates by these rules, they're all okay. Therefore, the subset of loads that lives in this world is all okay. Otherwise, you're having to do too much hunting, right? And so what happens, Thomas? Carriers get on Reddit and they go, all brokers fill in the blank.
Yep.
Right? And then brokers get on Reddit and they go, all carriers fill in the blank. And it's not right. It's not right to just categorically dismiss any segment of a business because you had a consistently bad experience with a few. How do you get rid of that? You get in the middle and you say, everybody that comes here is going to play by the same rules.
Same standard.
Right? And then it's not, it's a standard. And so that becomes the arbiter. Now you're the arbiter of trust, not the arbiter of the transaction, not getting in the middle saying, I know better than you. Does that nuance make sense? It feels small, but it's incredibly different.
Oh yeah. From my personal experience, it feels, one of the things is when you're approaching something transactional, when you don't have trust, you're still very skeptical. I'm gonna have to send all my docs, send all my stuff. Is this person gonna pay me? We have things even with like different reports to try and blacklist carriers because there's a lack of trust. There's all this stuff. You can remove the middleman of that by just having this ecosystem where you're legit. It's like going into a club. You get a wristband and they check your ID. You're gonna go into a place that everyone's been validated and verified. And I kind of want to think of looking ahead as well because you all have launched it. You've got CH, RXO. You recently had some extra capital raise as well in order to build. So when we're looking at that, what's kind of the next steps? You recently had the funding from the folks at FTV Capital with a recent growth round and Lead Edge Capital. Congrats on the funding as well, especially in this environment. It's really hard to get people to give you money these days. So you guys are killing it. I got some startup bros. What's next? Talk about some of your plans in the next 6 months. Where do you think it's going, and what should folks pay attention to as y'all are growing?
Yeah, I mean, look, the big part is really we now think about highway organized into three business units. And all of those three business units have leadership, executive leadership, product leadership, um, commercial representation. And so it's organized in three ways. One is identity, right? And so you can be an identity user and not use TFX. The core of highway is identity. The core of highway is being able to protect a motor carrier's identity, right? So that no matter what they're doing, so the future, right? That no matter what a carrier's doing, if they're signing in with highway, whether it's applying for insurance, no matter what they're doing, right? That carrier's identity, they have a digital profile that is protected and real, and they can move faster, right? And so they have a better, they just look better. They're trusted on the internet. And so that identity is an entire business, right? Here's the other thing too, like not every load is going to move through TFX. Again, we're not showing up and saying, hey, we're the answer to all your problems. Like our business is always going to say the broker is the point, right? Like exchanges have producers and consumers, and the exchange is about the empowerment of the participant. So like our business can never, we're going to keep going back to trust, right? All of the trust that we garnered as a business that has gotten us the, I mean, for lack of a better word, the love and the appreciation that we have from our customers. Like the minute we pivot to something that's different than what we said we were going to do, we lose all of that, Thomas. It all goes away, right? You would agree with that, right? And I think that's the problem with the current vendors, right? Is like brokers and carriers both feel like Lucy with the football. Like you've said a bunch of things to me before, but now it's going to be different. And again, like I'm not some freight tech guy. Like I am a 20-year operator that paid freight bills, that went to symposiums, that sat on product councils, where nothing changed except for the price of my invoice. So I say this with like, I'll roll up my sleeves and show you the scars, brother. So when we think about the future, like load compliance is a whole business for us, right? Like how do you think about, we call it identity in motion, right? Not just visibility, not a blue dot, not a dollar for a dot business, right? Like visibility should be a part of how you think about a load. So going back to me saying like not all loads move through the exchange. Brokers are going to move a lot of loads on contracted carriers that could still be compromised, that could still double broker, could still break bad, or there could be a change in insurance. Like all of this, the normal things in the course of business that you have to adjust for. And so when it comes to risk and business rules, we want to do our level best to contextualize all of that at the load level. So our load compliance and visibility and identity in motion business is a business, right? That protects every load. And then you have the capacity business. So in addition to TFX, there's a whole capacity solutions business. So when you think about making brokers the hardest target, when you think about closing the surface area of risk, you now get that safe space to focus on capacity and network development. And so those are three businesses. And so, you know, what having a great partner does is not just helps you with liquidity, because highway was already a profitable business. It's very different than venture, right? Like FTV bet on a profitable growing business, right? Which is different than betting on an idea that may pay off, which is what venture is. Venture makes a lot of big bets on a lot of ideas that may pay off. And venture is a fine model. Growth equity is very different. Growth equity looks at profitable businesses with product market fit, typically category leaders, and says, that's the lead horse. We want to help accelerate their growth. And that's what FTV said to us, is like, no one's doing what you're doing. We want to bet on you, right? And so we want to own a part of your business and be on this journey with you. And so what happens is you get a great partner that helps you go faster, not just with capital, but for me, like I now have great advisors who are like, hey, I'm about to make these two decisions. Can you please help me not screw up? Like, is there a landmine from your experience that you see me about to step on that I don't need to step on? Like personnel, culture, business planning, like all kinds of things that give the customer a better experience, right? So that's kind of the journey. 3 business units, people smarter than us that have gone where we're going, that can just help us make really good decisions.
One last question to summarize everything as well. It's kind of like the three-legged stool, the trinity of freight. You have the carrier identification first, and then you have the trusted exchange, which builds upon verifying both carriers and brokers. And then finally, as an added benefit, now that you've Put in your credentials, you're now visible to the types of brokers who are also legit, and it helps with the matchmaking without the Marco Polo on the load board where I scraped a very famous load board and I'm cold calling because I can't get capacity and it's just hoping that it works.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. And what happens is too, you get your carriers, they don't want to get bombarded with phone calls, right? When you think about the fact of, and this is something we think about a lot. Like, and carriers, if you don't have to look very hard to find carriers that say negative things because we're pretty big about holding people accountable. But it is hard for a carrier because they have to overcome a lot of trust issues because of bad actors. Because brokers, shippers are scared. But when you look at the motor carrier market, and you know this, right? Because this is what you write about. 96% of fleets, I think, Thomas, are still 20 trucks or less, right? I think that's still around the number. It's been holding that way for years. Okay, that operator can't field 100 calls a day, right? And they certainly can't field 100 calls a day from robots that are just blasting them for, do you have a truck? Do you have a truck? So it's good for a carrier, for a broker to only call them about things that matter. It's good for a broker to only call a carrier about things that matter to that carrier. Right. And so if we can represent a carrier's true capability for freight to a broker, the carrier is going to get a better experience. And if the broker, and I'm telling you, like you and I both did this, everyone thinks that it's all about, a margin on a load. And that's just not true with good brokers. You know this, I know this. A broker, if they can move more freight with a carrier or move it in less time, they'll pay 25 or 50 or 30 bucks. Because you don't have to work that load for hours. And so their margin, their net income is going to be higher. And so they want to find more carriers that they can give more freight to. They don't want to work it. They don't want the load to bounce and have to recover it. Like nobody wants that. You know what I'm saying? And so like that's the whole idea.
And really, we could do a master class. I feel like we could go an extra hour, but unfortunately, I'm running out of time. But this was a phenomenal conversation. I think you're almost like a freight philosopher, like the philosopher king of freight or something. Because we're going into like the philosophy of it, and it was a phenomenal conversation because I think there's so much trust that needs to be reestablished. Coming from both a carrier and a broker, I've kind of seen it both ways, and like you said, we all just gotta trust a little more. For folks who wanted to catch up on the upcoming stuff that Highway's working on, you guys have some conferences coming up. Tell us where to get the details, where to learn more, and where can we catch you?
Yeah, man. We will have people at every conference, right? A cloud user conference. We've got people at the Thai User Summit this week. Obviously, we'll be at F3. We'll be at TIA regional events. If you are a customer of mine, please come to our user summit in Dallas next week. We've got well over 100 different brokers coming into Dallas. We're really excited about it. If you're not coming, please come. And we'll be at all the, info@highway.com. One of us will get you. You can email me, michael@highway.com. And yeah, we've got the fall conference circuit is a thing. So we'll be everywhere.
Y'all gonna be staying busy. Michael, thank you so much for your time. Next time you're in Chattanooga, if you're in Chattanooga, we need to do a little sit down interview with the fancy cameras. We can cook along for like an hour and a half.
Yeah, I'm actually in Chattanooga today at my house. We moved this week, and so it's yeah. When you move, like it's horrible. It's hell. It's hell on earth for like a month. So I'm kind of locked down to the house this week. But yeah, I need to come see. We'll come into the studio and do something.
Perfect, sir. Hey, thank you so much for your time again. We'll catch up again soon. Thanks for going a little over with me as well on the interview, and looking forward to what y'all are working on next.
Thanks, brother. Good seeing you, man.
That's going to be a wrap for this episode. If you're just joining us, we're on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube, wherever you could find your podcast needs. Check it out, Loaded and Rolling. While you're at it, we've got the newsletter. Goes out every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern, freightwaves.com/loaded and rolling. I pick the top stories in the wild world of trucking, and sometimes I get to write them. Depends on what the freight gods give me. So thank y'all so much. It was an excellent conversation. Check out the folks at Highway as well, and I will catch you again.